Imagine walking through a peaceful park on a sunny afternoon. Laughter fills the air, and everything seems normal, until you notice an unusual scene. Two police officers are standing under a massive tree, their expressions cheerful. But what catches your attention is the woman hanging upside down from a rope swing, her smile calm, yet filled with an unspoken confidence. At first glance, it might seem like a lighthearted moment, but as you watch closer, you can't help but feel there's more to the story, a mystery waiting to unfold. The woman, dressed casually in a striped shirt and jeans, seems completely at ease despite the unusual situation. Her hair sways in the breeze as she holds onto the rope, but something about her demeanor stands out. Who is she? And why is she there? The officers laugh, unaware that they're in the middle of something far bigger than they could have imagined. What started as a playful moment in the park is about to take a surprising turn. This isn't just another casual day. This story is about courage, identity, and the hidden truths that can change everything. As the officers continue their light-hearted banter, they have no idea they're about to learn a lesson they'll never forget, and neither will you. Stay with me as I take you through a story that's not just surprising but deeply inspiring. By the end, you'll see how one woman's strength turned an ordinary moment into something unforgettable. So, what happens next? Who is this woman, and why does her presence matter so much? Let's dive into the story and find out. The park seemed like the perfect backdrop for a quiet afternoon, but the scene under the tree was anything but ordinary. The officers' uniforms stood out against the greenery, their relaxed postures giving no hint of what was about to unravel. They seemed to be enjoying the moment, perhaps thinking it was just another quirky day on the job. But while they laughed, the woman hanging from the rope remained calm, her expression unreadable. There was something about her presence, a quiet confidence, almost as if she was in control of the entire situation. What brought her here? And why were the officers so comfortable with what seemed, at first glance, to be a strange situation? The answers weren't obvious, but you could feel something brewing beneath the surface. The woman's story wasn't just one of chance, it was one of purpose. From a distance, it looked like a light-hearted scene, but those paying closer attention could sense the weight of the moment. She wasn't just hanging from a rope for fun or to entertain. There was a deeper meaning behind her actions, something tied to who she was. The officers, however, seemed oblivious, treating the entire event as a playful interaction. What they didn't know was that they were about to come face to face with a truth that would turn this seemingly innocent day upside down, just like the woman herself. Her identity, her past, and her reason for being there all carried a significance that no one around her could guess. As the breeze rustled the leaves above, the tension began to grow. Something was about to shift, and the carefree smiles on the officers' faces was soon to be replaced with something very different. The question lingered. What secret was this woman holding onto, and how would it change everything? As the officers continued their light-hearted conversation, one of them glanced up at the woman and asked, "You sure you're comfortable up there?" She smiled back, steady and self-assured. "More comfortable than you'd think," she replied, her voice calm and deliberate. There was something in her tone, something that hinted at a story untold. It was almost as if she wanted them to keep asking questions, though she offered no answers herself. Nearby, a few parkours had started to take notice. They whispered among themselves, unsure of what to make of the unusual scene. To most, it still looked like a harmless moment, maybe even a staged prank. But for those paying closer attention, the woman's confidence and the officer's unawareness felt like pieces of a puzzle yet to be solved. One of the officers adjusted his belt and leaned against the tree, still chuckling. "I don't think we've met before. You new to the area?" he asked casually. The woman tilted her head slightly, her upside-down gaze meeting his directly. "Not exactly," she said, her answer vague but pointed. It was clear she wasn't just making small talk. Meanwhile, a young boy playing nearby tugged at his mother's sleeve, pointing toward the tree. "Mom, why is that lady upside down?" he asked. His mother glanced over, hesitated for a moment, and then steered him in another direction, as if sensing something unusual about the situation. The tension in the air grew thicker, even if the officers hadn't noticed it yet. They were unknowingly standing at the edge of a revelation that could shift their entire perspective. The woman wasn't just hanging there for no reason. She had a purpose, and whatever it was, it would soon collide with the officers' unsuspecting world. But for now, the mystery remained, waiting to unfold. The air in the park seemed to shift as the moments ticked by. The playful atmosphere that had surrounded the scene began to feel more weighted, as if the woman's silence carried an unspoken truth. The officers exchanged a quick glance, perhaps sensing for the first time that this wasn't just a casual encounter. One of them cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "All right, so what's the story here?" "You're awfully calm for someone hanging from a tree," he said, half joking, but with a hint of curiosity creeping into his voice. The woman didn't respond right away. She let the question hang in the air, just like her upside-down frame. Then, with a faint smile, she replied, "Maybe you should be asking yourselves why I'm here." Her words were steady, deliberate, and they landed heavily in the quiet that followed. The other officer shifted his weight, now looking slightly more serious. "Okay, so why are you here?" he asked, trying to maintain his friendly tone, but clearly intrigued. The woman's eyes glimmered with something they couldn't quite place. Was it amusement? Or something deeper? "You'll figure it out soon enough," she said. By now, a small crowd had gathered at a safe distance, their curiosity piqued. The whispers grew louder, but no one dared interrupt the unfolding scene. The officers, now fully aware that something was off, straightened their postures. They were no longer just two men sharing a laugh. They were on edge, caught between their duty and their confusion. The woman glanced at the growing crowd, then back at the officers. "You think you're in control here," she said softly, her words carrying an unexpected weight. "But you're not. This moment, it's bigger than you, bigger than me." Her voice was calm, but the message was unmistakable. And just like that, the tension hit its peak. The officers, the crowd, and even the park itself seemed to hold their breath, waiting for whatever was coming next. The question lingered in the air, unanswered but undeniable. What truth was about to surface, and how would it change everything? The air felt heavier now, the playful chatter of the park replaced with murmurs of unease. One of the officers, trying to regain some control of the situation, took a step closer to the woman. "All right, enough games. If there's something we need to know, now's the time to say it," he said, his voice firmer. The woman met his gaze, her upside-down expression unreadable but calm. "It's not about what I'll say," she replied. "It's about what you'll see." Her cryptic words sent a ripple of curiosity through the onlookers. The officer frowned, clearly trying to piece together the meaning behind her statement. Suddenly, a voice called out from the crowd. "Wait, I recognize her." A middle-aged man stepped forward, his face a mixture of shock and realization. The crowd parted as he approached the tree, his eyes fixed on the woman. "You're," he began, his words trailing off as if he couldn't believe what he was about to say. The officers turned to the man, their tension now mixed with confusion. "Who is she?" one of them asked, his tone sharp. The man hesitated, glancing at the officers as if unsure whether to speak. Finally, he said, "She's gone all over the news. How do you not know who she is?" The officers exchanged a bewildered look, but before they could respond, the woman spoke again. "It's okay," she said, her voice steady. "Let them figure it out on their own." Her words carried an almost eerie calm, as if she had anticipated this moment all along. The second officer, now visibly unsettled, reached for his radio, as though sensing the situation was spiraling into something far beyond his understanding. But before he could speak into it, the man continued. "She's the one who exposed that case, the one everyone's been talking about. The whistleblower." Gasps spread through the crowd, and the officers froze. The revelation hit like a thunderclap, sending shockwaves through the atmosphere. The woman hanging upside down wasn't just anyone. She was someone who had already shaken the foundations of power. And now here she was, face to face with the very people her revelations had likely affected. The stakes had shifted entirely. The officers weren't just dealing with an unusual moment in the park, they were now entangled in something far larger. The crowd grew restless, their curiosity turning into a mix of awe and apprehension. All eyes were on the woman, waiting for her next move, as the tension soared to an almost unbearable height. What would happen now? The answer hung in the air, just as precariously as she did. The crowd fell silent, the weight of the man's words settling over everyone. The officers stood rooted in place, their expressions a mix of disbelief and growing unease. The woman, still hanging calmly from the rope, let the moment linger, watching as the realization began to dawn on everyone present. "I think you've heard my name before," she said finally, her voice cutting through the stillness. "But you've only heard one version of the story." Her tone was steady, but there was a spark of defiance in her words. She wasn't just speaking to the officers, she was addressing everyone. She smiled faintly, as if she'd been waiting for that very question. "Because sometimes people only listen when you show them what they don't want to see," she replied. "You see me here, hanging upside down, and you think it's strange, maybe even foolish. But this isn't about me. It's about all the times people like me have been left hanging, ignored, dismissed, silenced. You laugh because you don't know the weight of what this means." The tension in the air was electric, and the crowd seemed to hold its collective breath. The officers looked at each other, their earlier confidence now replaced with hesitation. Before they could respond, she continued, "And now you know who I am. Now you know why I'm here. But what are you going to do about it?" Just then, a woman from the crowd stepped forward, her voice breaking the silence. "She's right," she said firmly. "We've ignored too much for too long." One by one, others began to nod, their quiet agreement building into a murmur of support. The officers looked around, realizing they were no longer in control of the moment. The woman on the rope had turned what seemed like a strange spectacle into a powerful statement. They couldn't dismiss her now. Her message had landed, and it was undeniable. As they began to lower her down from the rope, one of the officers asked, almost reluctantly, "And what happens next?" She looked him straight in the eye and said, "That depends on you. The truth's out now. Let's see if you're brave enough to act on it." As her feet touched the ground, the crowd erupted, not in chaos, but in applause. The officers stepped back, watching as she walked away, her calm demeanor unchanged. But just before she disappeared into the trees, she turned back for one final glance. "This was never about me," she said. "It's about all of us." And with that, she was gone, leaving behind a park full of people who would never see things the same way again. The officers stood in silence, the gravity of the moment sinking in. They had laughed at first, but now they understood. They had been part of something far greater than they'd ever anticipated. The park returned to its usual calm, but the people who had gathered weren't the same as when they arrived. The woman's actions had sparked something, an energy that lingered even after she walked away. The officers, still standing near the tree, exchanged a quiet look. Whatever assumptions they had walked into this moment with were now challenged. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, each lost in thought. The crowd slowly began to disperse, but the conversations didn't stop. People whispered, speculated, and reflected on what they had witnessed. Some left inspired, others unsettled, but all of them carried a piece of her message with them. What had seemed like a bizarre scene had turned into a moment of reckoning, and everyone there felt its impact. For the officers, the event was more than just an unexpected day at work. It was a wake-up call. As they packed up and returned to their station, they couldn't shake the woman's final words. "The truth's out now. Let's see if you're brave enough to act on it." Those words echoed in their minds, forcing them to reconsider not just their role that day, but their role in a system that had overlooked so much for so long. Elsewhere, the woman walked with purpose, her footsteps steady as she moved toward her next destination. She knew her message had landed, but her work was far from over. This was just one small act in a larger movement, a movement for change, awareness, and accountability. And while she disappeared from view, her impact didn't. Those who were there would carry her story forward, sharing what they had seen and felt. Sometimes, it only takes one moment to plant the seed of change. And in that park, under that tree, a seed had been planted that could grow into something much bigger than anyone could have imagined.